Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Footy Travellers Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Footy Travellers Podcast, the show that will argue till the Swiss cows come home, brings you the best travel stories and advice from the world's greatest footy fans. I'm Colin Martin. I am joined sometimes at the hip, though today virtually, by my illustrious co-host, Mike Taroni. Mike, fun icebreaker today, actually. If you could be any type of cheese, what would it be?
That I could like eat myself? Okay. Well, that's easy. It's Parmigiano Reggiano.
I kind of figured you might say that. All right, that's fine. I was hoping you'd pick up on my Swiss cow reference and say something like Gruyere, raclette, but
Gruyere is pretty great. I was considering it, but I mean, you know, I got roots, man.
Yeah, that's fair. I would have actually even taken just plain old Swiss cheese, but that's fine. Either way, I just wanted to kind of get a gauge on how much you and I are on the same page today. So
not very much.
Apparently not.
What you're saying.
Apparently not.
Great.
Anyway, FFTs, listeners, our guest today has nothing to do with Switzerland, or does he? He was fairly close to everyone's square flag flying European country recently. And he's here to talk a bit about that trip, among other things. Like yours truly, he himself, along with some pals of his own, established roots in the soccer-themed podcast community back in 2018.
Shout out to season 1 of Counterspective, by the way, available a bit further back in the Footy Travellers feed, but go check that out.
Touche. Do that, listeners. But first, help us welcome to the show, founder and host of the Scuffed Podcast, the show that covers all things U.S. soccer, Mr. Adam Belz. What's happening, Belz?
Hey, thanks for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Pleasure to have you.
Yeah.
Before we get into the explanation behind all these weird references to Swiss cows, tell us a bit more about Scuffed and how that got all started.
Was a U.S. men's national team focused podcast that kind of evolved into also covering the women's national team. I think we got our roots were in tracking younger players before they became, big time national team players. Mm-hmm. And, we still do some of that, but the team is a lot better than it was when we started, as you may remember, back in 2018. So It's a little harder to break into the national team now.
That was a rough year for U.S. men's soccer.
Yeah. Been a lot of turnover since then.
Yeah.
And, that's it.
Speaking of footy traveling in 2018, were you at the Russia World Cup?
No, I was not.
Okay. You weren't
were you guys?
You weren't as masochistic as Mike and I were.
Yeah, we made it. We did it.
I would love to have been there for sure.
Hindsight's 2020, but yeah, it was a good time to squeeze it in.
It was a fun time. I mean, we did get some some strange reactions when people were like, "Wait, you're Americans in Russia and your national team isn't in this tournament." We're like, "Yeah, we still love the game."
You guys are a special brand of American.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Can we use that as a quote? I think that's
we'll make t-shirts.
Yeah.
People will love that.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about some of your buddies you started Scuffed with. Let's give them a little shout.
Yeah, definitely. Greg Velasquez is the sort of the serious guy on the podcast, and I think in a lot of ways the heartbeat of the podcast with his analysis. I think I don't know. I don't think there's a better analyst of the game.
Okay.
But obviously I'm biased. I mean, in the U.S. soccer sphere. And then Waki, you may know from Twitter.
Okay.
A guy named Chris. That's his name. His real name is Chris. And Vince, a guy in Louisville. And I do a show on Monday, the Monday Review. And then Vince and another person, Tara.
Yeah.
And I do a women's soccer show every other Wednesday.
The WOSO stuff.
Cool.
Yeah. And Greg and I recap all the men's national team and women's national team games, almost every single one for the past 2 years,
So have you traveled quite a bit then for U.S. men's and women's games and seen a fair bit of the country?
Less than you might think.
Okay.
I mean, we host like tailgates we hosted tailgates at several of the World Cup qualifiers.
Okay.
Going up to the 2022 World Cup. So anytime I could drive somewhere like Cincinnati or Orlando, the opposite directions from each other, but I'm about halfway in the middle.
Okay.
We would do a tailgate. But I traveled to the St. Paul qualifier, the one in the tundra.
Yeah.
0 degrees. That was the
very
total
unhealthy
blast.
cold one.
Yeah. It was so fun though. I think everybody there thought it was fun anyway.
Nice.
Maybe not the players. So yeah, not as much as you think. But we did do some traveling recently, which I guess is why you guys have me on the show.
Yeah.
That was new for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about that. I'd love to hear about, where the trip was and why there may or may not be a reach to bring in some Swiss references.
Yeah.
And kind of how that got started and what the idea was, behind it and all that.
The man with the idea was and is George Qureshi, who used to be the editor of Howler magazine and helped launch the Athletics U.S. soccer coverage. He's doing other things now, but he's always thinking about soccer stuff. And he called me and he's like, have you ever thought about a trip? Like trying to organize a trip? And we talk about it all the time on the podcast, but very jokingly, like, yeah, we're going to make a trip to Europe, That's ridiculous. But George was like, no, I think it could work. It could work.
Uh-huh.
And so we decided to do it quickly. This was like in February, I think, early February, he called me.
All right.
And because we're like, how long are 4 American players going to be playing in the same game when Juventus and AC Milan are playing?
Yeah.
Probably it's going to be a rare state of affairs.
Yeah.
And so we're like, let's try to go at the end of April. And we asked people in the audience if they wanted to sign up. People had to go to like a Google form and sort of figure out if they wanted to do it.
Okay.
And we thought if we could get a dozen people, we'd do it. We got 11 and we did it. And man, it was so fun. We went to Northern Italy,
right, as
you alluded to.
Yeah.
First Turin to see the Juve Milan game and a couple days there. It's a fine city. And then up to Lake Como, which is right next to Switzerland.
Yes.
Saw a Como FC game where Nico Gioacchini plays. And that turned out to not even matter because he didn't even play in the game. It was still a lot of people on the trip. It was still their favorite experience of the whole trip.
Yeah. I mean, that stadium alone, right? And the story they had this year. Congrats to Como, by the way,
Yeah. What a story.
Yeah.
And Cesc Fabregas is, prancing around on the sideline. One of the handsomest men alive.
Gosh. Stunning.
And
stunning eyebrows.
Yeah.
Mike, you might be muted.
Oh my God, I've been muted. I'm sorry. It's fine. I was just drooling over Cesc and Como, and I've wanted to go to Como forever. So, that is an awesome trip. But that doesn't sound like it was the full of it.
Yeah. Then the last place we went was Venice because we wanted to see Venezia also in a promotion race.
Busio
game,
in the squad.
That's right. Busio, Tanner Tessman. That game got moved by a day, which meant that some of us couldn't go. Most of the group actually changed their flights and stayed.
Okay.
And went to the Venezia game last Sunday, which is again a very cool. Have you guys been there? I bet you have.
No, that's not. Dude, you're naming these places that are on my bucket list for Italian stadiums for sure. And Venezia, in Como, of course, but
yeah. No, what
Colin
a cool.
We're trying to do that. We were talking about a trip, mostly to see Christian play,
and to catch the San Siro before they do any alterations if they're doing that.
Right.
I endorse that so wholeheartedly. I want to go back and see a game at the San Siro so bad.
Yeah,
because we took a tour of it. We stopped in Milan on the way from Turin to Lake Como. We took a tour of the stadium. That was really cool.
Yeah,
to see it empty.
Yeah,
and I can't imagine when the fans rush across that walkway behind the goal when there's a goal, because that walkway goes all the way around. It's a very pretty straightforward, stadium in some ways. I mean, architecturally not straightforward, but the seats and everything, it's way more bare bones than what you get used to in the U.S.
Gotcha.
Yep. That's
So
awesome.
yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've been to a few different European stadiums that we have yet to get to, especially from the club side of things. I think Mike and I started our travels really focused on those major international tournaments, nations versus nations.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know. I feel like I have a plethora of follow-up questions, but rating Como versus Milan versus Turin, what were some of your big takeaways? Beyond maybe the stadiums being a little bare bones, but from maybe let's talk about like transportation getting into the stadiums. We get into the logistics sometimes as footy travelers. So
yeah, let's talk about that in Como, because that was that was a really interesting day. We had a group that was staying in Airbnbs like halfway up the lake in a town called Colono.
Nice.
And there was like it was a great spot, and it was close to like several places we wanted to go around the lake for the 3 or 4 days we were there. But the day of, we had to drive into Como. So you got Lake Como. George Clooney lives up there. There's a place called the original place called Bellagio. It's like really nice. But actual Como at the bottom of the lake, also quite nice. But there's definitely more of a working class element there. It's like it's a working city, and people are like living their lives outside of tourism.
Yeah.
And so the stadium experience was much less like highfalutin and fancy than I might have thought, spending a bunch of time on the other side of the lake. Like definitely bare bones. It was they had a sort of a artificial is not the right word, but like when a high school puts up a big like stand of seats.
Yeah.
And you can kind of like see through the metal in the back.
Yeah, like the temporary ones kind of.
Yeah, it looks kind of temporary. Venezia has the same thing, but Como, all the ultras were up there behind the goal, the goal that they were attacking in the second half, and that part was full. And then the Tribuna, like where right in front of the the main press box or whatever, that was full, and that's covered, and it was raining, and then the rest of the stadium was just a few Cittadella fans out there in like the corner. And then you got like the lake behind the stand on the other side. I don't even know if the stand on the other side was open or not. It was pretty old, but that's where you could see Como.
Yep.
So from your seat, you could see Lake Como?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's
like
awesome.
Masts swaying on the current or whatever.
That's cool.
And like green mountains everywhere. It's very beautiful, but also very like, straightforward. You look like you're in a 1950s era high school football stadium or something.
Yeah.
A little bit. But man,
which has its charm.
It does, man. I mean, the way people watch the game there, I mean, in all the places, in both the places I went, but just like the attention to even like small things on the field as they're happening was pretty striking. And of course, it was a game full of promotion implications. Yeah, they won on a stoppage time goal to win 2-1 after being down 1-0. So it was we got lucky in that sense. We got to see a real triumph for the people of that club.
Something that contributed to the history. Yeah.
Did you, so this question being an Italian heritage and being a big Italian fan, and one of the things that I love that you mentioned is the way in which Italian fans watch matches. And I've been able to see it from an international perspective and a club perspective, because I've seen the derby versus Roma and Lazio, and the expressiveness is like the thing that's so incredible, because it's like, you've just got everyone, and it's not just the goals, right? Like it's like the match within the match within the match, like everything. Like if it's someone taking on one-on-one, they're gonna go crazy if they get by them, and it's like it just has a different style than I think what we're used to from an American perspective of just like, if it's a goal, you celebrate, but anything else, it's sort of like, it's not as...
It's not notable. It's not notable.
Exactly. Yeah. So do you think from all of the different matches that you saw there that you could tell the difference in terms of the style of watching or supporting? You mentioned it as from Como's perspective, but were there maybe differences between other ones that you'd seen?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so I would say I go to like national team games, and I've probably been to like 4 or 5 MLS games. I think all of them in Minneapolis, and which used to sell out. Minnesota United used to sell out. I think maybe still does.
Okay,
pretty good.
Good fan
nice
base.
Stadium, pretty good fan base.
Yeah.
But I would say like an intense World Cup qualifier, like against Mexico in Cincinnati, where you got 30,000 people who really want to be there, who really care a lot about something that is somewhat esoteric still, the World Cup qualifier.
Yeah.
Against, I mean, it's against Mexico, so it's not that esoteric, but still, that crowd is actually pretty, I think, intelligent in the way they watch a soccer game. Like they're locked in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would take it a step further with the two crowds that I was part of. The one in Turin, Juventus's home stadium, and Como. Just like you said, they're locked into like little dramas within the game. The one-on-one battle between Tim Weah and Rafa Leao, or like a nice sequence of passing that isn't immediately dangerous will draw like a lot of audible appreciation.
Yeah.
Like before it becomes actually dangerous, because they have a sense like this is developing, as
Right.
I'm sure you guys do when you watch a game. And
sometimes,
and then
yeah.
like you said, everybody's really demonstrative about it. One thing I talked about on our podcast, which I think was interesting, is it almost felt like there were little like pods like sprinkled through the stands where there'd be like one guy who was really funny and all his friends around him, and he was like performing for his little section of the seats. And then there was another guy, and like people were kind of got to the point where I was like, I can't wait to hear what this guy says, or like how he says it, or I can't wait to see what that Larry David looking guy does on the next time Dodger kicks the ball out of bounds. There was like this kind of show going on.
Yeah, like entertainment within entertainment.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I haven't been to a ton of MLS games, so I don't know, but I have not seen that at like a Minnesota United game where there's like people so into it that they're like making jokes off the action on the field,
Right. Yeah. It feels like I've seen that in maybe other sports or different like leagues where sometimes people will have just like a personal vendetta to one player, and then they kind of jump on them and they make jokes, and it builds from there. But yeah, I think I always am fascinated by that sort of that viewing element of like, you don't just go there and you're just watching the match. Like I like to watch the fans and just see the way that they are interacting with the game. And it sounds like, I mean, Como sounds like picturesque, right? I mean, it's hard to be like, I want to watch the fans and watch this match, and then I still have this amazing view that is in the background. Like that sounds like
sensory overload.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I forgot to mention the boring logistical part, which was it was really difficult to find parking by the stadium.
Oh, okay.
So George and I were both driving a vehicle, and we had to park like a 30-minute walk away, and then walk through this like very pleasant business district to get to the stadium.
Was this with everyone that was on this trip?
Yeah, so we dropped everybody else off at the stadium,
and then parked.
Everybody we were hosting on the trip, and then we went and parked. Of course.
Gotcha. So yeah, since you mentioned it, and you said the word hosting, tell me more about like how you hosted it. Did people pay their own way, and then you just organized everything else?
So people paid like a flat fee to us for the trip.
Gotcha. Food,
lodging, tickets to games, tickets to museums, tickets to everything. So everything paid for, except like it wasn't like a wet bar.
Yeah.
You couldn't like come and spend like, but wine, generally wine at dinner.
Okay.
Was part of the flat fee, and then people had to pay the airfare to get there.
Gotcha. Yeah. Gotcha. And the day,
we all met in Turin, got keys to Airbnbs that night, and then checked out of Venice. That was on Saturday, the night of that game, which also got moved, which made things kind of hairy for people.
Right.
Because some people flew in like an hour before the game. And then, so we all met that night, got Airbnbs, and then checked out of the Airbnbs in Venice on Sunday, a week later.
Gotcha. Had you had any prior experience organizing sort of big trips like this?
But no, I hadn't. And it's like my personal nightmare to organize a trip like that just for myself.
Yeah.
But George did all the organization, all the planning, and he did, I gotta say, a fantastic job. I challenge you to find anybody who went on the trip who didn't really have a great time.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, awesome.
he might be the one to ask this question, but we're going to ask you. What was it like getting tickets to, like a Serie A game, or Como's? They were Serie
B.
Yeah. So
I think Como was a little easier, but still not like super easy. Juve was down to the wire. Like it was that was like the decider that made the trip sort of official, you know.
Okay.
So if I get confirmation that George worked on it,
yeah,
you'd have to ask him all the hoops he had to jump through. But that once we got confirmation that we had the seats to that game, then it sort of like kicked in, like, all right, now you got to sign. Let's get some signatures and get going with this, you know.
So from a practical standpoint, you went after match tickets first and like anchored on that point, and then made all the other sort of maybe easier to get logistical tickets.
Yeah, I think for a crowd that size, again, George knows more about this than me, but a crowd that size, you know, to get that many tickets all at once and like bundle everybody together.
So you sat together on all the matches?
That's right.
There weren't broken up.
And we would have all sat together for the Venezia game, but again, it got moved.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. All right.
Wow, that's impressive. What was the take on? Were they all American, like fellow American travelers, like coming from the States?
Yeah, you know, we met. Yes, they were all coming from the States, I think. But there was one guy who met us in Turin who was living in Berlin. Another guy. These weren't people who were on the trip, just like people who came and hung out that night after the game in Turin. A few people from different places came to like meet up.
Okay.
They came mostly to watch the game, but then they're like, yeah, let's go meet up with the Scuffed guy.
Was there any impression that was made, like as a group of Americans or, you know, people that are, you know, not locals coming and seeing a lot of different, you know, I wouldn't say obscure, but, you know, like we stand out.
Did the Americans stand out? Yeah. Is that what you're? Yeah.
I suppose so. Yeah. I mean, it's mostly, I think the language, you know, that none of us really spoke Italian. Yeah. There was one woman on the trip who spoke a little Italian, you know, but
you got by, I guess.
Yeah. But that makes you stick out. I'm sure like a lot of other stuff made us stick out, but maybe I'm too American to know what they are, you know? I mean,
everyone came back unscathed.
Yeah, no, it was, we did a lot of prefix dinners. So like you had to be a little bit of an adventurous eater, you know, when the octopus comes out, first dish, third dish and fifth dish, you know,
every odd dish is an octopus.
Yeah.
Speaking of US stuff, you know, what US based experience from like a stadium or even like a game day or fan perspective, however you want to look at it, but what comes closest to a European one, or the European ones that you?
I think what I mentioned earlier is my answer. Like a meaningful World Cup qualifier where you have to, for the U.S. men's national team, where you really have to work to get those tickets. Yeah, I don't mean that the supporter section looks the same or you have the same, you know, trappings, but I mean in terms of like people are paying attention to what's going on in the field and they largely understand it, and I think respond to it in a much more muted way. Okay. At one of those games, but I think that's the closest because the MLS games I've been to, there's no intensity. I'm not trying to hate on MLS. It's just like, well, that's I mean, people are out for a night at the ballpark, and people in Como, I mean, especially in a promotion race, they're not there for a day at the ballpark. They're there like striving with all their being for the team to win, and
their week is based off of it. Like their happiness and everything is based off of it. Yeah.
Is that a healthy way to live? I'm not sure, but it's more fun. It's
a passionate way to live. Yeah, it's more fun. Yeah. No, I hear you, and I guess I'm glad you clarified, because I think that's been my experience too. Is I don't experience the passion and fervor and excitement here in the U.S. Like I'm in Denver, Colorado, and I was at the Rapids game on Saturday night, and beyond some of the regulars and the supporters group, the rest of the stadium's just, like you mentioned, out there for a nice Saturday with the family. They're going to hit the concession stands.
Nothing wrong with that.
And fair to it. Nothing wrong with it. But to me, it's always kind of been funny, for lack of a better phrase, that you get that passion and that intensity from club football, club soccer in Europe. And it takes these major rivalry international games, which is to us means typically USA Mexico. And beyond that, it's just kind of like, well, if I want anything super exciting, I either got to wait for the next round where it means anything. And for us, USA versus Mexico is probably not going to mean anything for a little while now. Or like Mike and I have done, we take these trips and we kind of, we taste the bug or catch the bug, and we're always planning and searching for the next one or saving up for the next one. So,
that's awesome that you guys do that. I mean, I don't want to be too, like crying about it. It is what it is. American soccer has a certain place in American culture. It's obviously not the place that soccer has in Italian culture.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the fact. And how are we going to get to a point where it's more like that here? We need many, many more millions of people to love soccer the way we do.
Mm-hmm.
Guess you better go coach your rec soccer team. I mean, that's really the only answer. Your kid's rec soccer team or some other kid's rec soccer team.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you.
More people who love the game.
What's your take on how we do that? Yeah, just
need more people who love the game, and I mean, there's no quick solution.
Yeah,
it's going to take a while.
I'm working on it.
Well,
Mike knows.
Do you feel? Yeah, I mean, Colin's grassroots in it. He's a coach, so he's
awesome. Colin,
he's doing it right. Do you feel that path has already been set, though? In my opinion, I think American soccer has created a culture of its own, and it's not trying to replicate European culture. I think it tries in some ways, but I think because of the influence of commercialism and capitalism and ways to benefit and make money, MLS specifically is going to find ways to sort of massage the way that soccer is, put upon the fan base a little bit differently. To your point, I mean, by comparing the stadiums in Italy versus the stadiums that were playing MLS or major, Jerry World in Dallas, those are night and day, right? And I think you really do lose elements that make Italian, club soccer fan bases passionate very differently than in an American base. And I don't think it can be replicated. And I don't know if the people that are making the decisions around it want it to be. I think they want to make it its own entity,
its own brand.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a whole other discussion, but yeah, I get why MLS built itself the way it did. It's hard not to see promotion relegation as just like a really good thing for club soccer. But I don't know. I'm not like protesting at Soccer House about it. It's like, it's not going to happen, not soon. So, and you can see why they took the sort of safe route and did it as a single entity, shared the risk.
Yeah.
Right. Soccer it was not a given that MLS was going to survive this long. And now they got Lionel Messi. So all our problems are solved, right?
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
I will say one other thing.
Yeah.
One other thing the trip really drove home to me is, I would say, to my discredit, I was not somebody who thought like, oh, I really want to go see this bucket list soccer stadium or this bucket list soccer fan base in person, unless there was like an American involved, because that's the focus of the podcast. That's been the thing that's so interesting to me. I'd say this trip totally changed my mind on that. Like I was reading about Fabian Hertzler, the new, the St. Pauli coach who was born in the US. St. Pauli just got, promoted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was looking up that stadium on Wikipedia last night and on Google Maps and zooming in and out, just salivating like, dude, I would love to go see a game here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if there's no American plan. I just want to go to Hamburg and see a game at St. Pauli.
You've got the bug now.
Hey.
It sounds like,
dude, I got the bug, no doubt.
Love to hear it.
I do not have the means to satisfy the bug, but I just have to be patient.
Still there.
Exactly.
Just gotta be patient. Yeah, exactly.
Keep plugging away.
So going back to maybe kind of back to the U.S. soil, we haven't really asked you about your plans for this big, massive legacy deciding tournament that's happening in the United States for Copa.
A couple legacies up in the air, perhaps. I mean, Messi's kind of solidified with his last tournament trophy, but if we're talking U.S. soccer.
Whose legacy are you talking about? Messi's?
Well, no, that's one. But I think
That's
the
one.
major one's the obvious one. We can chat about if you'd like. A certain coach, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay. I thought that's what you were saying, but just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to. But from a travel perspective and from tips or anything that you may see or feel would be beneficial to fellow U.S. supporters, because it's another major tournament that's being held in the United States, and I've been calling it kind of a trial or a practice run for 2026, right? I mean, some of the stadiums will still be the same ones. Any thoughts on that in terms of, you're in the world in which you are in, which is heavily rooted in the U.S. men's national team? What are your thoughts?
I'm not a very sophisticated domestic traveler. I mean, if it's close enough where it's within 6 hours, I'm going to drive, if I can get approval to go to the game. And, so yeah, I don't think most people want to do that, right? Most people want to fly.
6
if it's
hours.
I don't know.
I mean, we have such expansive distances between some of these cities, so sometimes driving is the option. I don't know.
I guess my insight from this recent trip to Italy is I liked the model we were on, which was basically we did cool stuff in the place where we were, and then we went to the soccer game.
Right.
And then we did more cool stuff in the place where we were.
Yeah.
And then we went to another place and did the same thing. And I don't do that when I go to games in the US.
Fair.
Right.
I mean, I went to Dallas for Nations League a couple months ago. Was it a couple months ago? Whenever it was. March
something, yeah.
And I barely even did anything in the city. I was just running around to press conferences and stuff. So yeah, well, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying the trip to Italy that we just did was so different from anything else, any other travel I've done. Because I've always been like sort of on the clock. Got to plan this tailgate, got to go pick up a keg, got to make sure the garbage gets thrown out, got to like make sure food arrives on time, the right person has a credit card, and that kind of stuff. And then I went to Italy and I was just like, traveling from museum to museum. I show up and I'm at a Juve Milan game, and it was really nice, very different from the usual Belz expedition.
I mean, it sounds hard to not catch the Footy Traveler bug when you do all those things and package it with a nice little balance of sort of tourism and going to games, like you said. We've only met fairly recently, but I'm happy for you. I'm glad you got to experience all that.
My co-hosts, because we recorded on the Sunday night, 2 nights into the trip.
Yeah,
we recorded the Monday review, and I had come straight from dinner, and I realized, and it was like this really good dinner. Everybody's sitting at the same table, and I had to go record, but I was just riding high, like 4 glasses of Prosecco, and I was like, this trip is actually going to work, and it's going to be so fun. And so they still talked like how I looked like I was transfigured that night when they talked to me on the. You
had a different aura.
Yeah, like there's a light around my head.
Love it.
I mean,
so I'm still feeling that a little bit.
I think
light that you guys have had for years.
Well, yeah, it's the addiction light. I think it's the
glow of dopamine. I think
it's the light gets brighter and brighter, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think the style in which you described that trip is very much one that we try to do as well, which is we like to travel for football, but we want to also enable that as being travel for all intents and purposes of travel, right? Like,
edification.
We talk,
yeah.
Right. I mean, we joke about this. We made it to Russia, right? And why would we go to Russia? This is a weird thing, but like we end up in St. Petersburg. Yeah, we're going to probably go see the Hermitage. And I can now walk away and be like, that was the coolest museum I've ever been to in my entire life.
Was it the coolest museum you've ever been to in your life?
Yes. Yeah. And I've been to the Louvre. I've been to a ton of museums.
So much there. We didn't even see it all. I mean, to be honest.
Like what's the specialty of it?
The opulence.
Yeah.
It's just so much wealth and history, and it just is like this beacon in this city that is really cool and really old, but you're just like, this is so much. It felt like all of the money in that entire part of the world was put into this building.
Crazy.
And it's just gold plated everything.
The rooms are
and
just pure gold and white pillars of marble, and opulence is a great word, Mike.
That is the definition in my mind. And so, but it's like that's the type of thing that we try to do, which is, when talking about logistics and spreadsheets, it's like we build around the framework of the match, right? So like the same way that you did it, like you want to make sure you got matches, and then you figure out, okay, what do you want to do while you're there? And unfortunately, like for us, we're going to Germany for the Euros. That's not unfortunate, but the only matches that we got were very close to each other, so we're not getting a lot of time. So I'm starting in Leipzig for an Italy match.
It's supposed to be a fantastic city, right?
Yeah, I've heard Leipzig's very cool, but I won't get a ton of time there because then literally the next day we're going to Dortmund. I can't remember which match that's
going to be
one, right?
No, it's going to be France-Poland.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And then the next day after that, we're going to Stuttgart.
Yeah. Okay. That's Belgium, Ukraine.
Yeah, which will be a great one.
Yeah.
So it's
a cool stadium too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I know I'm going against what we typically say, which is like, yeah, we land in a city, we try to do a little bit about, cool things that you do there. This is a little bit more of a unique example because it was based off of the amount of tickets that we got, or the tickets
which ones we got. Yeah,
right. Yeah. But it's still one of those things where, to your point, like we want to go and do something there of cultural meaning, whether it's getting a really good meal, traditional meal, or doing something. And I think a lot of people that we meet through this community that is kind of growing with the footy travelers and the fellow footy travelers, they do the same thing. They're like, soccer is a means to get us to travel, but it's not the only thing. We like to go and bring our spouses and, experience other things, but then you get to go to the match and it's a cool event that you get to partake in. And I think that's the really special part about it, is like, you can make it 100% about the footy, or it could just be a very small piece and you'd still have a really good time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we'll hit Munich a few days after our whirlwind first 3 days in Germany and have some downtime to spend it with German folks and maybe hit a beer garden or two, or 7.
That sounds nice.
But
in the summertime?
Yeah, right?
Yeah. During the Euro, like in Germany plays that night. I mean, that's what it's all about.
That's going to be great. Yeah. Just watch. So that you're just going to watch that game in a bar, which sounds really nice.
Yes.
But that's what you're doing.
Bar or awesome. Euro are doing the fan zones that the World Cups have done in the past. So there'll be a big sort of outdoor, massive screen viewing area. I don't think Budweiser will be the only beer available there. So looking forward to that.
I got to say, Allianz Stadium, there was only one beer available. I think it was Peroni. And, it's fine. But
yeah,
that's an SA Bev beer, I think, maybe.
I think so.
A beer.
It's a beer.
It's a beer. Yeah, it's a beer.
Belz, so you said you're going to drive to Copa games if you are able to get tickets. You're probably not going to fly too far.
No, I thought about. I may still fly to Kansas City for that Uruguay game.
Yeah,
I'm not going to go back to Dallas for the Bolivia game.
Champions League finals weekend was enough.
Yeah, I've had enough. Okay. I've had enough of Jerry World.
Well, I'll miss you there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it'll be fun, and hopefully we put up some goals on them.
Yeah.
And then I'll drive to Atlanta, which is like 2 hours from where I live.
Okay.
And we'll do some pickup. We'll do some pickup soccer. Hopefully earlier in the day, and then tailgate. Probably not tailgate. Probably meet at a restaurant.
Yeah. Okay. Sweet. Yeah, fellow footy travelers who are listening, I know there's a few of you who will be at the Atlanta game. So if you're looking for some pickup, check out the Scuffed boys.
I'll put the details on Twitter at Scuffed Pod.
Okay, sweet.
Because pickup, we're always looking for bodies.
Yeah.
A lot of people can talk on the internet, but the number of people who can actually play soccer is quite a bit smaller than that.
I'm gonna call out Eat Pray Balls, Matt Marshall.
I was just gonna say.
I know he's a big pickup guy. He's got his own podcast. He's originally from the Atlanta area. I hope I'm not giving away too many personal details for Matt Marshall, but Matt, if you're traveling for
he better be there.
for the game,
He better be there.
He better be there. Yeah, I think
Soccer station. We're trying to. I'd like to do it at the 5 Points Soccer Station, which is like a train station where they have a little like pitch right next to it.
That's cool.
Cool.
Not like that pitch
like
that
10,
has
10 minutes from the stadium.
Yeah, not the pitch that has the train go
right
through.
across the field. No.
I'm glad we all picked up on that. What about World Cup 2026? US has its games set on the West Coast. We know that already. Are you making plans already, or?
I haven't made any plans. I mean, I need to make plans, but I'm not there. I got too much other stuff to think about between then and now.
That's fair.
2026 will come. I mean, I imagine we'll tailgate or host some kind of event at each game. It's getting to the point where hosting an event at a place makes a little more sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of offsite away from the stadium prior to.
Somewhere close to the stadium that isn't going to get too crowded. I mean, it kind of doesn't matter that much. I think in St. Paul we had the 0 degree game.
Mm-hmm.
I called this brewery a couple weeks before the game, and I was like, "Can you guys open a little early? I think we'll get like 50, 75 people there.
Nice.
Drink your beer." He's like, "Okay," and then we got like 300 people there. And
wow,
so it's hard to tailgate. I mean, that was a World Cup qualifier. A lot of people cared about it. I have some community in Minneapolis, St. Paul, so it's a little different. But you can't running a tailgate for 300 people it's not my idea of a good time.
That's right.
That's a lot of work.
Got to contract that out for sure,
bro.
Yeah,
hire the experts. But it sounds like you'll be on site. What is it? LA and Seattle? Is that where US?
Yeah, it should be on site.
Okay.
Yep. It's a funny thing, like the games, covering the games, is so much easier from home. Like sitting and rewatching it, taking good notes.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but people don't often really want to hear what it was like in the stadium if they watched it on TV.
That's fair.
Like they might, if there's something really specific, they might want to know that you saw it, or that was true or not.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, when you're like inside the stadium, it felt I can just hear people's earbuds falling out of their ears all over the nation when I say stuff like that.
Touche.
I don't know. There's something about it. It's like I can't go back and be in the stadium. Why are you telling me about it?
Yeah.
We both saw the same game, buddy.
Right. I mean, and to add to that, sometimes when you're in the stadium, you get, you go home and then you hear from people who watched it on TV, like what was actually happening. It makes me think of one of our latest guests who was at the 2006 World Cup final as a French fan.
I was just going to say this.
Saw Zidane get the red card, but didn't really see everything happen before that.
Materazzi headbutted him.
Of course,
in
it'd
the
be
chest.
easy to miss it in the stadium.
Right.
Right.
Because it was away from the ball,
Right.
I think the first thing he said,
no replays.
Yeah, no replays back then. The first thing he said he saw was Buffon, making the run to the ref to yell at him and, discipline Zidane. But yeah, no, I hear you there for sure.
But the craziest part about that whole story, in my opinion, is he had never seen the altercation until 2 years ago. He had avoided seeing the replay or video of the headbutt. And he's a French fan
on purpose,
intentionally. He's like, he doesn't watch the replays of any matches that he goes to.
He wants his memory from the stadium,
the memory of the view from where he sat in the stadium.
Yeah.
And so he's just like, he is like a purist. I don't know, a purist to the experience in stadium. And I could not believe it. He was like, I'd never seen until just recently. I just saw like how that happened, how that played out in video. I'm like, how do you even go your life avoiding that? And he's a massive soccer fan. They're like literally the French national team's fan leaders. Like they are the ones. Yeah. So when you were saying that about, experiencing in stadium, it's an interesting take. I've never thought of it that way, of like never watching a replay if I've been to a match live.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I'm not that. I don't trust my memory that much.
Same.
Like, I mean, I can try to preserve the memory all I want, but
it's,
it's gone.
It's very French. It's very romantic. I'll give it to him.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
To each their own. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Maybe one more question, Belz, about the, upcoming pending World Cup. You guys talk a lot about rosters and stuff. Do you have any specific don't know, dreams or hopes, or I'll call them aspirations for our roster come 2026? Anyone you're hoping either is or is not on that one?
I mean, it's coming up so fast. I just said I haven't thought ahead to plan out what we're going to do yet for 2026. But in terms of player development, it's coming really fast.
Yeah.
2 years. So a player has 2 years to break into what, like the top 14 of the depth chart, something like that, 14, 15.
Yeah.
It's gonna have to be a meteoric rise from somebody. So that, I guess that would be my aspiration, that somebody just catches absolute fire.
Someone
but
new
I don't know who
or
that's gonna
someone
be.
who's already there? Does it matter to you?
Well, yeah, somebody at least on the fringes.
Who do you think has the potential to have a meteoric rise?
I mean, I hesitate. Taylor Booth is on been on people's radars for a while, and he's fine, but I think we kind of know who he is now. I don't know who has, maybe a young left back, maybe Caleb Wiley at Atlanta. He's established enough where he could like conceivably make the leap.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm as excited about Kevin Sullivan as everybody else is, the 14-year-old at the
at
Philadelphia
a
Union, but I don't think it's happening before 2026. If it happens,
that would be crazy.
Yeah,
be a stretch.
That'd be Freddie Adu style. Yeah,
he'd be, exactly. So I don't have much hope that our roster is going to improve, which is fine. I think we have a good roster.
Yeah,
we have the best roster we've ever had, and I think if we play well, 5 games in a row, we could. Mathematically, we could beat anybody. Yeah.
So is a semifinal out of reach for you, or?
It's not out of reach, but it's also not like it's not like an expectation. From me.
It's one more win that we'd have to have because of the size of the tourney, right? Isn't there? You would have to reach a semifinal. You have to win an additional game.
Yeah, you have to win a knockout round game,
right?
Which
so there's a round of 32, right?
Right.
Oh, I was thinking of Copa. Yeah. Is the semifinal? Is that? I mean, it's kind of out of reach for us. Yeah. Don't you guys think? I mean, you think it's within reach? Not semifinal run at the World Cup.
Not necessarily.
Do you want? I just recently looked up odds, and I texted Colin this. Do you want to guess the odds of the U.S. winning the World Cup in 2026?
I do now.
I'm not very good with odds. What's Brazil's odds?
I have France's. France's are plus 330. They are the favorites. Which means that they are. Hold on, let me get this. I had it up earlier.
Because you had texted everyone and asked.
330.
So Brazil and France, not 330. Brazil and France are 550. So that would make
is that 5 to 1 odds then?
That is 5 to 1 odds,
roughly.
Yeah. So Brazil and France are even money at 5 to 1.
U.S. winning is if they're 550, the U.S. is 55,000 to 1. I don't know.
Pretty close. Vegas Insider, which is a different one that I looked up the other day, it says it's 3,300.
Sounds pretty
that's
close.
330 to 1. Just after Italy. Although the reason I ask is I saw one that was 1,800, which was saying they were 18 to 1. And I'm like, what? That is insane. That's not in my mind. I don't think that's.
I don't understand odds and odds making.
I just don't think. I think we could. Morocco made it to the semifinals. I think they're not like completely out of our league. I do think they probably have a deeper player pool, but I don't know.
Do you think that was? Do you think that the Morocco run was inspired or affected by the region in which the World Cup was being played at, and therefore you're making that comparison of like the U.S. then being a host could make a run, has a better chance of making a run because it is being hosted in country?
I was just thinking of them as a team that made the semifinals that isn't, considered a world power. Because, it is, as we all know, it's like a very small club of nations that have actually won the World Cup or even really been in the semifinals.
Right.
So I think I can see it's conceivable that we could go, but I don't even expect us, things that go wrong. Soccer's a crazy sport, man. Things that go wrong in the group stage, not the group stage if there's 48 teams or whatever, but things that go wrong in our first knockout round game, and we could easily lose. We're not like Germany gets knocked out in the group stage every other World Cup.
For our sake, I hope that doesn't happen at the Euros, because a bunch of angry and or sad Germans. It's not going to be who I want to hang out with.
Them.
No,
that'd be a bummer.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Well, Belz, what didn't we ask you? What do you think folks should know about either, travel related or Scuffed related or really anything?
I don't know. The Venice was a lot cooler than I thought it was going to be.
Okay.
The city itself, or the football?
It was magic. Have you guys been there?
Mike, have you?
I have not been to Venice. No.
No. My Italian experience is limited to Rome and the Amalfi Coast as well. So
okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a magical city, and I would love to go back to see a Venezia game, but also just to take my kids through there.
We better do it soon, because they keep saying that it's it continually sinking, and so I was going to ask you, was there any water issues while you were there?
No.
It happens more often now.
No, I know they do. They have like flooding and stuff, right? But it seems like the city is built to just be wet on the underneath,
Mm-hmm.
And it is. But like it wasn't an issue. Walking around, it's
that's awesome.
You can
walk.
A
lot of tourists.
You don't have to take a boat.
A lot
everywhere.
of tourists.
No, you can walk anywhere in the city using the bridges.
Okay,
but there's a couple canals that only have a couple crossings, so you got to get to the right spot. But yeah, what a place! So like all these like sudden little passageways, and then all of a sudden you're like in a little square with 3 really nice cafes. You go down some side hallway almost, and there's another square. It's like something from a storybook. I was blown away by it.
Awesome. All right.
That's awesome.
Well, add it to the list, Mike.
I know. It's been on the list.
We got to up our club travel game.
It seemed like the neighborhoods around the Venezia Stadium were much quieter and just like normal people live there.
Compared to
the where the Basilica of St. Mark is, that famous square with all the columns and stuff. That was just a madhouse all the time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Cool. So footy traveling might bring you to a more sort of local vibe in cities like Venice. So
are you guys going to be in Kansas City?
Another reason. So the original plan for me was to be there, and then it was turning into like this really rushed European leg of the Copa Euro plan we had overall for the summer. So
the Euros took the
being in Europe for some of the Euro knockout games and experiencing it amongst like those bars or fan zones. We have yet to really follow up on our what we think is a brilliant idea of, after a major tournament group stage, on the way home, stopping in a country that's still in it in the knockout rounds and experiencing it. Like you said, sometimes it's better to watch at home. Like you just have a different experience than being in the stadium. So we're going to stop in Portugal for about 5 days together. Michael extend his stay a little bit. And my plan is to fly straight to wherever, fingers crossed, we're playing the quarterfinal, whether that's Vegas or Phoenix. So
oh man, that's great. That's a great plan.
Yeah,
I love that
I'm going to have to sell my Kansas City tickets, is to answer your question a little more directly. But
okay.
The original plan.
That reminds me of one thing I wanted to tell you. I just thought of that. I got to tell you guys.
Yeah.
Watching a game in a bar, a big game in a bar in the city where it's happening is can be really cool. I did it once for a Celtic Rangers game. So I was in Glasgow. Wow. This was 2000. I was 19, and I was on a ship, and I was this other guy, this Norwegian guy, and I were like, we're going to go scalp some tickets. And we started walking around the stadium, asking people if they knew where to buy tickets, and they just all laughed at us. Like absolute. Who are these idiots?
Good luck,
you're
buddy.
Not getting a ticket to this game.
Yeah.
So we
You
just kind of
tried,
walked around the stadium, and it was back at the time, and maybe they still do this, like mounted cops in a line on either side of the pathway from the train station. It was actually at Ibrox, so where the Celtic fans were getting off the train to go to the stadium. And I remember like the horses rearing up and the crowds like yelling at each other. And then we were like, all right, we're not going to get tickets. We went in and watched the game in this bar, and it was packed, and it was standing room only. I think Henrik Larsson scored 2 goals that day.
Okay.
And the cabbie that took us back to the ship after the game, he was singing the Henrik Larsson song to us,
Okay. What's he,
He's the king of
Swedish or
kings.
Scottish?
He's Swedish, but he was like a Celtic.
Or
legend.
cabbie, I was.
Oh, the cabbie was Scottish for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just loved the fact
That's
that he played
awesome.
for Celtic. Cool. No, that would be, that's definitely on our list of club travels is good. Yeah, any of those derbies, obviously, but that one, knowing its history is particularly interesting.
I think tickets particularly hard to get too.
Yeah, it's
Well,
like one of the most sought after ones.
Do both home venues not allow the other fans anymore? Isn't that one of the
I don't
the
know. I
issues
haven't
there?
caught up. I haven't kept up with it.
we'll
But
have to leave something in the
No.
show notes to clarify that. Yeah.
they're both really big stadiums.
Yeah.
But
I think, given some of the violence, if you will.
You did touch upon a thing that Colin and I have talked about is we've, because of the World Cups that we've been to, and you see all of these videos of people at bars watching in the States, right? And so big goals that have happened, and you've got these, beer showers and all this stuff. And we're typically in country, and if we're lucky enough, in stadium, which is, again, a phenomenal experience. But we haven't had the opportunity to do like a proper US watch party at a World Cup, like in the bar, and like, everyone comes out for it. And I feel like it's an awesome, like, it just seems like such an awesome experience. But I mean, again, I don't want to sound pretentious and be like, well, we were there, but it is a very different experience being at that stadium with a bunch of neutrals, and obviously the opponent fans, and you've got your own USA fans, but there is a different scene when you're just like kind of crammed into a bar and everyone's paying attention to the screen, and it's just, and especially for the US, it's just like, that's so awesome.
that is a really fun experience. That's probably my warmest experience is watching a US game. We're like at a bar in Minneapolis in the middle of the afternoon, during the work day, everybody comes down,
Right.
and everybody's just like glued to the TV. And the sense of collective, the togetherness of that is somehow even, I guess, matched only by, I'm not that big of a national anthem fan as a song, and it's not my favorite song, but when you have a whole stadium singing it together, which was what it was like in Cincinnati before that Mexico game in 2021, that was the only thing that rivaled the sense of togetherness in the bar in Minneapolis for me.
Yeah.
I won't take that personally, even though I live in the city in which the national anthem was written in, and it's just over there. But no, it's fine.
It's the one that the bridge was named after. The guy,
Francis Scott Key. Correct.
How's that bridge coming, Mike?
It's going to
Still
be
gone?
good 5 to 7 years. Not rebuilt.
That was.
They just found the last body like a few days ago, right?
Gosh,
They did.
That was tragic.
Yeah.
Well, Belz, thank you for joining us here on the Footy Travelers podcast. It's always great, I think, when we can host someone truly worthy of what I think might be the triple crown now. So, fellow Footy Traveler, fellow U.S. soccer supporter, and fellow podcaster. So
The Triple Crown. I like that.
Yeah.
Are we the same person?
I do like Elijah Craig, so I don't know, maybe.
Listeners, once again, Adam Belz is one of the hosts of this Scuffed podcast on all things U.S. soccer. If you're not subscribed, give them a follow. Consider supporting their work through their Patreon. Of course, if you haven't done so yet, if you're perhaps new to the Footy Travelers podcast, do the same for us. The best way to support us right now is by telling your friends about the show, leaving us a rating and review wherever you're listening. You can also visit our fan shop. Until you hear from us again, wherever you are, whatever footy madness you're getting yourself into this summer, whether it's Copa or Euro or both.
Be loud, be proud, and be good to each other.